Our next speaker is Dr. Nita Ali. Dr. Nita Davis. She's currently the Director of Security Architect at Microsoft, where she leads the Digital Security and Religious Resilience Architectural team. Dr. Davis is an active community and global leader, and this perspective that I appreciate. I think she will bring a perspective about what's happening on the ground. She's currently serves as president of Cyberversity in DC chapter. She's a council member for the Ministry of Economic and Entrepreneurship in Jordan. She's also a committee advisor for Distinguished Women Leaders Program at the University of Richmond in Virginia. Her current research is focused on the importance of diversity and inclusion. Her doctoral work explores the importance of regulatory accommodation in Islamic banking and advance greater inclusion and diversity in the global banking system and to support Muslims' access to financial instruments aligned to their first. Again, a reiteration of the conversation that keeps coming up. Please welcome Dr. Nita Davis.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Is it good voice? And how do I change? Just click the green to push? Okay. First of all, I want to thank you all for having me today to talk to you about my work in the space of Islamic banking and finance. I'd like to also thank Dr. Ula for being my supervisor in this work. I want to give you a bit of context about my work because I'm not an Islamic scholar and I'm not a finance expert and I'm not a banker. So I started this work out of my desire to create a bridge of communication between the East and the West. I spent 20 years working for the Federal Reserve System in various capacities as an officer. I'm trying to change the green? Okay. So I have to start with a disclaimer. As an officer, retired officer of the Federal Reserve System, we always have to start with saying any opinions, any views I provide you today are wholly and solely are mine. They do not represent the Federal Reserve System. I'm going to talk to you today about my work in Islamic banking and finance and why I went down that path. I will start with saying the spirit of my work. I can summarize it in one of the surahs in the Quran that says, وَجَعَلْنَاكُمْ شُعُوبًا وَقَبَائِلَ لِتَعَارَفُوا إِنَّ أَكْرَمَكُمْ عِنْدَ اللَّهِ أَتْقَاكُمْ. So it was as part of my effort to connect with the West in a discourse, in a discussion, in a communication, where we would talk about what is Islamic banking and finance. Why is it important for the regulators, not only in the United States, but regulators globally, to provide accommodation for this form of banking and finance? I have spent 20 years listening to regulators, what they worry about, what they think about, what they assess, and the types of things that are important for the regulators. So in my discourse with the regulators, some of the questions were like, what does God have to do with money, with finance, with economics? It's a very important question. It's a question we really need to ask and to talk about. So in my discourse, I started communicating to them about what is Islamic economics and where are the commonalities between the West and the Western view of life and the Islamic way of life and the pillars of Islamic economics. In my work, I shared with them these very important 4 areas about Islamic economics, just in a manner where we can find common grounds for the discourse. The first one is a social system should have a balance between the rights and the obligations of the individual and society. Second, no individual should be denied equal opportunity for his moral, social, and material growth in any society, in any community on the face of the earth. That's a universal right, no matter what your religion or your background. That is a core tenet in the Islamic economic system. No individual should be denied his basic rights and freedom in society. I attended Georgetown University. I attended the School of Philosophy as a Jesuit school. My work was an attempt to establish that bridge of communication between the East and the West. And to do that, I needed to find common framework of ethical values we both agree on that are important and that are universal. So for the Islamic economic system, for the banking system, for the finance system, many times when we start the conversation, especially in the regulatory circles, the concept is, this is the interest-free type of finance, and when you look at the majority of the product, they're kind of relabeled and twisted so that they are really interest, but they're like, we change the name and they are interest-based. This is a view that is is a view that we need to talk about as we introduce Islamic banking and finance as an ethical framework, as a framework that goes beyond the idea of, it's interest prohibition for the usury, which is very important and it's core in the ethical structure of this form of banking and finance. There are many prohibitions: usury, speculation, haram, particularly haram when you go on the ethical framework of what we consider haram, and also the gambling, the maisir. So as we engage on Islamic banking from an ethical point of view, it is beyond, it's a usury-free or interest-free type of system. It's a system of life, it's a way of life, it's a system of ethics. And in that, what we do, we just go a little bit deeper into why these values are important for Muslims. When Muslims make decisions, I argue in my theses, they make decisions driven and aligned to their ethical values, to the way they see the world, their view of the world. And whether you agree or disagree with the way they see the values or the ethical views that they have, that's their view of what is important, and that's how they are making decisions, economic decisions, financial decisions, etc. So I actually challenged the idea of a traditional, classical economic system. And I tried through my work to say, no, we don't always make decisions from an economic based on supply and demand. There's a whole new discipline called behavioral economics, where decisions are made not solely on the power of supply and demand. So let's get to the heart of the matter. Why is this important from a regulatory perspective? And remember, my audience to my work is the regulators, to encourage them to accommodate. What does accommodate mean? There are structural areas in Islamic banking and finance that are difficult for the regulators to work on and engage with. Profit loss, for example, in the banking system. Double taxation. There are differences in the way the regulators engage. And also, you have to remember, the vast majority of the current global economic system, the banking system, is debt-based. We, in the Islamic banking system, it's equity-based. The majority of our products are equity-based. So it's the idea of what's more stable, a debt-based banking system or an equity-based banking system. So as I started engaging with the regulators, I needed to talk about 3 areas I need to address. I needed to address, A, the imperative that all regulators are required to support, and that is to increase the access to financial services. So financial inclusion is imperative for all regulators. It's actually part of their mission. If you look at the mission of the Federal Reserve System and other central bankers, part of their central mission is to increase financial inclusion of everybody in the community. So Muslims are, the majority are unbanked. And my research points clearly that they have self-excluded from the interest-based banking system due to faith value. So as a regulator, we need to kind of have this conversation with the Islamic communities, with the academics, with the investors, and figure out what can we do to align and provide possibilities for them to access the financial system. My study argues that we can, in fact, increase Muslims' financial inclusion in the global economic system through a regulatory accommodation of Islamic banking and finance. That happened in the United States, but it's very limited. It happened in 1997 through the OCC. If you are familiar with the US regulatory structure, we have three major agencies. The Federal Reserve is one, the OCC is another, and then the FDIC. We have three agencies that are focused on the regulation of banks in the United States. Most of the Islamic banks in the United States are under the auspices, the regulatory auspices of the FDIC. They are non-regulated by the Federal Reserve System. It depends on the charter, it depends on the nature of the bank, the size of the bank, and the complexity and its stability. The FDIC primarily and mostly oversees community banks, but they have other banks too they regulate. So Ijara was the first product that was introduced into the United States, and there were regulatory accommodations made to make this product available for the Muslims in the United States. And then the New York State also provided approval for this product, functionally equivalent to or logical outgrowth of secured real estate lending. So there was like cross-comparison between these products and what we can do with them from a regulatory perspective. Then the issue of tax, double taxation is a big issue in the Islamic banking and finance. So that was also was addressed, particularly with mortgages, and that made it easier for Muslims in America to access these types of instruments and for some of the efforts and initiatives you see today in America to emerge in this area of finance. Murabaha is another product that also has received a regulatory accommodation. So let me tell you a little bit about my approach in the study. I have used a mixed methods research design. I wanted to systematically address three questions. From a regulatory perspective, always it's important for regulators to answer the question of, is it stable? Is this banking system stable? Can it withstand, the cyclical changes in the economy? Is it resilient? So I needed to kind of take a sample of Islamic banks and do the analysis to say, are they not stable? So I worked on that quantitative part of the analysis. Then I needed to answer the question of, do you really need this form of finance, and does it really lead to an increase in access or financial inclusion as an imperative for the regulators? So part of my analysis was quantitative, and then the other part was qualitative in my study. So in my study, I have included 65 Islamic banks operating in 11 Islamic countries over a period of time to study their profitability and their stability and their ability to increase inclusion. I also used qualitative surveys using SurveyMonkey instruments. I reached out to regulators in the Islamic world and to Muslim consumers with a survey to ask them questions. And I also then went into Jordan, my country of origin, and I also did a very tailored survey, interview approach with Muslims in Jordan, with Jordan being one of the first countries in 1978. It had its first Islamic banking and finance, to examine their perspective and their views on Islamic banking and finance. So for those Muslims, I had an Arabic version. I sat with them, I talked to them, and I transcribed my work. We have to always know that there is a constructive world view for all humans. So for the work on identity and Islamic identity, as you can see here, according to Creswell, one of the things that we have is that in this research, there are different ways that we view the world. And for my thesis work, for my qualitative side of the house, I needed to select a view that aligns with my work. So I really selected the constructivist view because I was trying to achieve understanding. I was also trying to achieve the goal that there are multiple participants in the definition of meaning. So what means to me as a Muslim doesn't necessarily exactly what means to the American or to any other point of view. So we have to understand that there are multiple points of view. And these ideas of meaning stem and are rooted in social historical construction, including religion. So I chose a constructivist view in my work. So I can analyze, do Muslims make decisions, financial decision that is, based on their religious values, their historical, social construction, or is it supply-demand, basic classical economics? Are they going to buy the cheapest product, or are they going to buy the product that aligns with their faith values? So I needed to do that research, and it was difficult because there's not a lot of data. So let me show you the structure. This is the structure of my thesis, of how I have structured my work. There's a country setting, there's a professional setting, personal setting, and in the heart of it, how we make decisions. Decisions at the country level, decision at the business level, decision at the individual level. And under that, the Muslim financial decision-making process is in the heart of my work. The internal influencing factors and the external influencing factors are very important. So I structured the convergence between the qualitative and the quantitative. Based on those, I'm going to bring them both together, and then I'm going to bring an interpretation for the outcome of my thesis work. My quantitative was straightforward. The first one was there is a positive relationship between regulatory accommodation and the stability of Islamic banks. So my position is that Islamic banking and finance is stable. Equity-based finances is stable, and there will be quantitative work to actually support my premise. Second one was there is a positive relationship between the stability of Islamic banks, and I chose the Z-score to measure the stability of Islamic banks, and Muslims' financial inclusion. This is the heart of my thesis, is that A, they are stable. B, they do positively lead to increase in inclusion. Hence, regulators, you need to sit down and kind of work with Muslims and Muslim communities and the Islamic world to figure out how you can accommodate. But that's not enough. That's one half of my thesis, which is the quantitative. The second one is the argument with, well, people don't make decisions based on their values when it comes to economics. It's supply and demand. So I needed to also focus on that part. This is the result of my work. My thesis is available. You can find it online. You can find a version here. So my Z-scores did lead to, definitely they are stable. And in the countries in my study, from the year 2011 to 2016, we have seen a steady increase in the Z-score values with the continued accommodation. And on the financial inclusion part, which is here are the financial inclusion factors that I have studied, they all have shown an increase as well through the correlation. So on the quantitative side, we're good. All right, on the qualitative side, I had to bring these two results together to figure out where are we. Are these decisions aligned with the quantitative work? And I found that it's positively correlated. Religious values do in my work. You will see in my qualitative side of the work, it is confirmed that the religious values do indeed have a very strong impact on Muslims' financial inclusion. And the regulatory accommodation of Islamic banking and finance is positively correlated with the Z-score results. So my work was really geared towards the regulators, and it was part communicating with the regulators on what matters for the Muslim community and the worldview in making decisions, economic decisions, and to refute that it's not the idea of what does God have to do with money or with economics. It's the ethical values and the constructivist view that leads those decisions in our lives, and they are very important, and they all lead to a positive outcome. So thank you so much.